Gare St.Lazare Ireland is an Irish theatre company with a repertoire of 17 Beckett titles, as well as a solo adaptation of Moby Dick and new plays by playwrights Michael Harding and Will Eno. And today, I'm joined in the studio by founding members and directors of Gare St.Lazare Ireland, Conor and Judy Lovett. Judy, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
And Conor, yourself as well.
Thank you, David.
Now, we've known each other for a very long time, and it's great to have you on Paris Live for the first time in that long time, indeed, that we have known each other. But let's have a look. There is a little hook to our meeting today. Gare St.Lazare Ireland was initially the Gare St.Lazare Players, and today, or this year in 2019, you're celebrating 20 years of existence. Let's just look at those 20 years as a theatre company. What have been the highs and lows? Judy, what about yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I suppose we set out at the beginning with solo works that Conor mostly was the actor for. And the company has developed quite a bit in the last, I suppose, 6 or 7 years in particular, in that we have now bigger productions, etc. And I suppose what we have been doing for the last 20 years is touring internationally. And now we're bringing bigger works, bigger productions to, I suppose, blue chip venues like the Lincoln Centre in New York, played at the Gaiety Theatre in Dublin, which is a fantastic and very beautiful theatre, and, attending, I suppose, bigger and better international festivals as well.
So definitely over the last 2 decades, it has really grown from, as I say, maybe a one-man or a two-person show, if you will, you as director and Conor as actor, into a much bigger, more, well, what would you say, massive production in comparison to what you were doing 20 years ago. But Conor, for yourself now in the development and being kind of the key actor within the Gare St.Lazare Players as it was originally, what were the high points and maybe the low points over the last 20 years for yourself?
There were no low points.
That's very good. That's a good start.
However, I think, ultimately we began with the work of Samuel Beckett, and with our first show was Malloy, which is actually a novel by Beckett. And this has become, if you like, our area of specialty, which is to take prose works by Samuel Beckett, novels, short stories, novellas, and to put them on the stage. Mm-hmm. So Judy now, I think, has directed over 11 or 12 Beckett prose pieces, and about, I think, 17 or 19 Beckett titles in all. And we've now toured to over 83 cities in 25 countries. This last year, 2018, we made our debut on the Abbey theatre stage in Dublin, with a production which, if you like, was very symbolic of what we've done. It was a creation with Beckett texts, with a composition by a London composer, Paul Clark. Also the work of Irish fiddler Caoimhín O'Rahilly, who is also a regular with the Gloaming, apart from his stellar solo career. And we had 6 singers from Boston, and we had a soloist from the UK as well, Melanie Pappenheim. So this wonderful, all this taking place around an art piece by Irish artist Brian O'Doherty, who's a major Irish artist. So this has been, in a sense, an accumulation of where we've been going along the way.
And I mean, to explain to our listeners, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, to play the Abbey Theatre, there's a kind of a Rubicon you've crossed. It's like playing the Carnegie Hall, if you will, if you're a musician. To play the Abbey Theatre as an Irish artist and actor, it really means, is it right to say that you have arrived? You already had arrived elsewhere, but to play the Abbey was it a big moment for you? I suppose
it was a huge moment. It was a huge moment, I think, for the company, though.
Yeah.
As an actor, of course, you want to perform in the Abbey, but I think Judy and I were really proud to present the company's work on the Abbey stage.
Yeah.
So that was fantastic. And the Abbey, at the moment they're doing amazing things in terms of co-productions and all sorts of touring around the country, taking the theatre to the regions, as it were. Yeah.
Well, I mean, bringing maybe the history of the Gare St.Lazare players and Gare St.Lazare Ireland back here. I mean, why have Samuel Beckett's works been your focus as a team? I mean, you both have been living here in Paris for over 20 years. Is it anything to do with, well, both his and your connections with the French capital?
Well, I mean, it's hard to not to see that.
It's hard to ignore, I
It's hard
suppose.
to ignore that parallel, if you will. But there was no real design in it from that point of view. Judy and I think, both discovered Beckett around the same time, which was when we were in our late teens, living in Cork. Judy studying at the art college, and me knocking on the doors of local theatre companies. So that's when we came to Beckett, and we came, I think, to him. The first play Judy ever saw was Waiting for Godot, isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah, I saw a really lovely small production of Waiting for Godot in Cork at the Ivernia Theatre, which doesn't exist anymore. But that was a kind of a key moment for me in sort of realization of what theatre can be other than pantomime.
Sure.
Although some would argue that Godot isn't far from pantomime itself. I think we just had a kind of a mutual understanding of the writing, and we had a great success with the very first production we put on when we brought it to the Edinburgh Festival. And I often do wonder, had that not been a success, would we have carried on? But because it was, it gave us great confidence in being
grist
able
to your mill that was
Yeah.
able to bring you and give you the elan that you needed.
that we needed. Yeah.
Now, let's just say that I've been mentioning since we've started our little discussion here about the Gare St.Lazare Players was the original name, and now it's Gare St.Lazare Ireland. But what's in the name? Well, first and foremost, why Gare St.Lazare, and why the little change over the last 20 years? Conor?
Well, when we first came to Paris, Judy and I, we came from Cork in 91, I think, and we intended to stay here for a year, expose ourselves to the continent, or whatever you will, and then go back to Cork. And when we arrived, we learned very quickly of an expat theatre company doing work in English called Gare St.Lazare Players. And we went to see them performing in one of the Irish bars on the Sweeney, I think. The Sweeney.
Doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't exist
No.
anymore. They were run by a man from Chicago called Bob Meyer, who's a great artist in his own right. And he was writing plays and directing plays and producing plays. And we joined up with Gare St.Lazare Players, I as an actor, Judy as assistant director, and within a year Judy was being asked to direct work for the company. And at the same time I trained at the Lecoq School, the École Internationale Jacques Lecoq. And from there we spent, I guess, most of the 90s doing work with Bob and the company. And in around 96, we headed to London to prospect for the gold on the streets
Of the West End, I
That's
suppose.
right.
Yeah.
And it was in London, indeed, that we first did Malloy by Beckett that I mentioned earlier. And as that progressed, and as our Beckett thing began to create its own dynamic and momentum, we diverted from the original company.
And that was it. And so then they became Gare St.Lazare Ireland. But you left on very good terms, of course, with Bob.
We did.
Now, you mentioned Malloy, and I think that was the last piece that I saw you in all those years ago since we last met. But Conor, let's call a spade. I mean, you are renowned for your one-man show pieces, such as Malloy, directed, of course, by yourself, Judy. But in what can be described as a minimalist environment, to say the least. The directing side of the production, however, is not so straightforward as you would think. Judy, can you talk us through it? I mean, we're talking, it's not just, when you're looking at it, it's all black, but there's more to it. Just a quick description, if you will, of the process.
Yeah, actually, this is a question I'm asked often because it isn't probably obvious what goes on backstage or behind the scenes often for people. And unless you have, a full team of people and stage sets and stage designs that kind of explain all of that, it's a little bit more of a mystery what does happen. And I suppose it really is, because it's solo work, it's a very intimate relationship that we have on many levels. But it really is about sort of accessing the true voice of the piece and getting the actor together as a collaborative work, which all theatre is, getting the actor to the stage whereby he can really speak those words as if they're his own. And that does take a certain leap of faith. It takes time and it takes hard work to get to that stage. So that's much of what we would be doing together, trying and testing that. And then, there is a kind of a physique to any work that you're delivering. And there would be sort of key movements and key positions that kind of describe what the character is. And I suppose the very special or particular or unique thing that we do with the work is that we allow it to kind of sit between being sounding like it is the actor speaking and the character speaking at the same time. And that's quite a difficult thing to do, and we do it well.
It's a tightrope indeed. Now, a very good friend of mine, Nick Devlin, we were discussing this before coming into the studio, just finished touring Waiting for Godot. I think it was with a production company known as ABA or Abbey. They played in London's West End, they were in Hong Kong, and they were playing to full houses in Singapore. But you, Conor, you have been described, and this is the old chestnut that we've been saying for the last 20 years that we've known each other. You've been described as the quintessential actor or interpreter of the roles in Godot, but this is according to none other than Sir Ben Kingsley, as was evoked back in the time. But let's look at the companies that are bringing Beckett's work around the world. Is there a lot of competition in the theatrical world or scene to get a so-called gold star for being the best Vladimir and or Estragon on the theatre and on the stage? Is there a competition out there?
I wouldn't think there's a competition in the way that... ultimately, I do think theatre, like many of the art forms, benefits from its collaborative foundation. And even if you're with a different company, or there are different companies out there, I think we're all trying to do the same thing, which is we're trying to find what's the truthful creative expression that we can muster. And with Beckett, I find with Beckett that particularly in this age when religion has been kind of kicked to touch in the West at any rate, there's something about Beckett's work that people can accept and can cling to. And I don't mean it in any way that he'd be any kind of a guru or leader, but he has somehow said it's okay not to know what it's all about. And
this has a certain resonance and relevance, of course, in the world that we're living in 2019.
I believe so, Dave.
Now, moving maybe away from what we were saying about Godot and Malloy, you over the past few years you've been working on Beckett's How It Is over the past few years, which you've described to me as an unpunctuated train of thought, and I was like, oh my God, is this going to be like Ulysses by James Joyce, where there's literally, it's a kind of an internal monologue. But tell us about this. This has been a good few years in the making, and it seems to be, gathering traction, if you will. Tell us about it.
It's Beckett's last full-length novel. It's maybe about 200 pages in length. There are no punctuation marks whatsoever. It's written in 3 parts. Part 1 part 2 and part 3, and it follows a character who appears to be in a landscape of mud and darkness with a sack full of tins and a tin opener. And he moves through this landscape until he finds another person who appears to be in the same situation.
With the tins and a tin opener.
With the tins and a tin opener. They couple together. That's to say they hang out for a while. This is part 2. And then that other character abandons the first character. And the first character is left alone in part 3.
So this is, and you've already, if I believe, you've already produced, you've had a production of part 1 of this, How It Is. But of course, coming into 2019, there is a part 2.
That's right.
Tell us about that. This is coming up in the next year.
Yeah, I suppose just to say it will be a work when we get to part 3 as well. That will have taken us 7 years in the making. And I suppose we're getting to that point in our careers where we're, taking real time with work and actually developing it in the way that we want to. And so, part 2 is due to play at the Everyman Theatre in Cork, great theatre. And it's where we premiered part 1 as well. In September of this year.
Gotcha.
And so we have on board for that production Stephen Delane, who is a UK actor, brilliant actor, and he's been with us for part 1 as well. And we expect he'll be there for part 3. So he and Conor are the principal actors in the work. And we also have Mark Padmore, who is a UK tenor, on board with us for that production as well. So we've been working with a brilliant sound designer and sound composer, Mel Mercier, who hails from Dublin originally and is now based in University of Limerick as well. So we've a great team with us, for that work.
So that's coming up in 2019, and of course you've got another 20 years to look forward to, and I'm sure there'll be many more productions as the Gare St.Lazare Ireland team grows and the projects roll on. But before we leave you, Conor and Judy Lovett, I would want to ask one question. When are you coming to Paris? Even though you live just a little outside, when will the productions be coming here to the French capital?
Well, good question. And we are very keen to present here. The opportunity hasn't arisen so far or immediately. We have done sort of smaller productions here, but we haven't yet got past the line with a big production. And we'll be relying on you and this interview to make that happen.
Well,
David.
There we go. We will try. We will try and pull the strings, especially with our culture vultures here within the RFI studio building. Well, we'll leave it at that. Judy Lovett and Conor, thank you very much for being on the programme today.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.